Peter, I've got a strange question. I think it's strange. Is experience experienced?
Not ascertainably. We're used to thinking that experience is experienced. There's an experiencing principle or an experiencer, and there's something experienced. But all of that is really derived after the fact as a logical argument. This just is.
It's just part of experience.
Yeah, this just is. Experience is. And the notion that anything is happening, or how it's happening, or that it has, if there's a verb involved, or for that matter a noun involved, is all logical deconstruction after the fact. The fact itself is completely inscrutable, and it stands alone. I mean, this is, and we call it experience, and nothing more really can be said about it. And all of these, hypothetical arguments can be made about, an experiencing principle and experiences being experienced, but all of that, there's no direct presentation of that immediately. This is, or just plain is. The notion that there's a this even is we're so used to being biased by the structure of language, which puts things in terms of subjects and predicates and adjectives and all these things, and so given this, then it is or it isn't, and how is it, and in what way is it, and what's doing it, and what is being done, and all of these things, which are basically logical constructions that are implied in the structure of language rather than in the event itself. And of course, that's really the challenge in all this work, is to see this as it is, to extricate ourselves from all of the preconceptions and assumptions about how we're used to holding this actuality as consisting in various ways, as that we exist within it, and it exists, and that something is happening, and so it's happening in various ways, and all of these suppositions and arguments that typically we just take for granted. We don't even assume that they're even questionable. It's just, well, of course something's being done and something's doing it. Of course something is being experienced and something's experiencing it. It's just, of course. But if you look nakedly at just the event itself, it doesn't. None of that is necessarily implicit in it. In fact, coming to really see that fact is realization. Just this, it solves the conundrum of you, solves the conundrum of life, solves the conundrum of a separate individual, solves the conundrum of all of these qualifications that we're used to making. There's just this. So you are this is this.
The reason I got to that was I realized there's no experiencer, but there is, but it seems to have been in the past an experience that changed my life.
Uh-huh.
And that is, my tendency is to put that in the past tense. And I know that there is no past for it to have occurred in, but it's still.
Well, there isn't not a past either.
There isn't not a past, exactly.
It can't be.
So
it can't be sorted out in any way whatsoever.
So, what happened to me was an experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it happened before now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's experienced. That was my thing. That I understand that there is only now, but there is also, as you say, a past or not a past. And that's not qualifiable.
Well, the past is this. The experience you had that changed everything was this, and it was, and the way in which this can seem to be that, again, is inscrutable.
It's inscrutable, exactly.
But it's actual in the sense that it is this, because this is that is, because that is this. That is this then.
That is this then.
And then when then was now, that was now. So that is this.
Yeah. Well, that's why you brought up the word experience. And experience didn't compute.
Well, it doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute.
So it's a conundrum.
Yes. Well, the fundamental fact is sense can't be made of anything. So, and yet actuality is. And so the actuality of that event is undeniable because it happened. It was actual. And then worrying about the niceties of language of it, happened with a D or is or was or all this is irrelevant. It's just because none of that stuff.
It's not a worrying, it's a mind game.
Right.
And that mind game sort of tumbles through space.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, that's the mind's nature, is to be trying to, sort things out, sort out the unsortable.
Yeah.
But what that mind is and how it works is also absolutely inscrutable and mysterious. So even that event and all of that going on is completely, bizarre, completely inconceivable. But actual.
Peter, I have a question about deep sleep. I'm not sure that I experienced deep sleep. I mean, I know that I experience a lot when I'm falling asleep and a lot before I wake up. It's dream state. And also, you pointed out that there's elements of the dream state and the waking state which I can recognize now. And is there a way to, because you tell me it's not important if it's not important, is there a way to cultivate awareness of deep sleep?
I wouldn't worry about it. The awareness of deep sleep will spontaneously develop as your relationship to your experience deepens and integrates in the course of this unfolding.
Okay.
And likewise, in the sense that the dream state is going on during the waking state concurrently, as well the deep sleep state is. So a good time to investigate the deep sleep state is from the waking condition.
I've heard you say that. Since I know what the dream state is, so I feel like I can recognize it now. But if I don't have a conscious understanding of the deep sleep state, so it's hard to recognize it.
Yeah. You can play with it. It's just, the consciousness is so flexible and suggestible. It can be interesting. You can just assume that you can and then just do it, even though you don't know how to or what it is, or just okay, I can do that, and bang.
Yeah.
Play with it. Try things like that.
Yeah.
But this spontaneously develops, and it's not important.
Okay.
All of the minutiae of recognizing this aspect or recognizing that aspect is unimportant. The only thing that's important is to be engaged with your experience in a noticing mode, i.e., in a mode of nakedness, in a mode of naked engagement outside of preconceptions. In any way that you have access to that, even if it's only in very limited sort of conditions or limited context. And that's all that matters, and that alone will spread through everything. So it's not like you need to develop this, and then develop that, and then develop this, and then develop that serially. On the contrary, just any one place where it's like lighting a dry forest on fire. You just need to light it one little place, and the whole forest is gone. It's not like you need to go around and light every single dry twig.
It's good. It's good news.
About deep sleep, that's sort of a good thing to sort of ponder, because it's obvious I experience it, right? I mean, I have to experience it, and I have to say, it's one of my favorite things. I love it. So I must know it. I really like sleep.
Yeah, if it wasn't,
I'm starting to stay in bed more and more and more. But when I was younger,
if it wasn't an actuality, you wouldn't have a relationship with it.
Right, exactly.
And also, when you wake up out of deep sleep, you don't feel like you were just created out of nothing, from the last instant when you were awake or a dream or something, and all of a sudden there was just no intervening time, and all. It's not like that. There's a sense of passage of time. There's a sense of.
Yeah.
So
that's a good word.
We're not used to recognizing deep sleep because deep sleep is such an alien experiential sort of palette of qualities.
Yeah.
To dream and waking state, which we're much more used, because the conscious mind is not functioning in deep sleep, and we're used to orienting to our experience in terms of the conscious mind. So we're used to. You can think about the conscious mind thinks, and you can think about the waking condition because there's lots of apparent differentiation to think about. You can think about the dream condition because there may be degrees of differentiation to think about. But the conscious mind can't touch deep sleep because there's nothing to think about. There's nothing there, or not much that it could relate to, even if it could perceive it, in terms of presentation, in terms of characteristics.
Yeah, that's why I like it, because it is so strange, and but it's something that I know is there, even though it's so bizarre. That's
Yeah.
that's what's so great about it.
But as unfoldment progresses, you begin to move out of being a conscious mind chauvinist, and you begin to have much more direct experience of your unconscious, what is usually categorized as unconscious experiencing types and so on, which are very different, and they're not conscious. They're not a conscious mind. They're not non-thought type experiences. And this just becomes is very natural, and it becomes second nature. And when you get let's say, conscious access, so to speak, to these more unconscious modes, then their realms become available to you. Their realms become appreciable, let's say.
Is that something that we should cultivate?
No, it does itself. You don't need to. You can. I mean, you can play with it.
In a way, that's sort of a good way to get out of the conundrum that John brought up at the beginning. I mean...
Yeah.
Considering it as more of a relationship or something kind of continuum, or that's what experience is.
Yeah. I mean, right now you're experiencing everything. You're experiencing all possible modes of reality. They are present right now, and that's what it feels like being. Now, you may or may not notice this, but this is largely because of the degree to which you're conditioned into only considering certain categories actual. You're only sensitive to a certain range of phenomena that you are capable of acknowledging, and other things you automatically write off as being noise or irrelevancy or something, and then you're just not even noticing them, even though they are actually present within the experiential field, or as the experiential field, let's say. And so the process of unfoldment basically consists of the spontaneous development of sensitivity to the full range of modes of this being, of this event here. And at that point, you can freely, relatively, tune into all any different area, any different sort of bandwidth within the experiential field, because they all always exist. And in the immature condition, in the spiritually immature condition, is on an unfolded condition, the infolded condition. There's a heavy-handed censorship where only this very certain narrow bandwidth is acknowledged, and the rest of it is just being written off through a kind of a auto-hypnotic condition.
Yeah, I think I've sort of asked you this before, but I mean, it's clear to me that unfolding develops. Is for me is becoming less and less sensory.
Yeah.
And more, I don't know what it is, but
well, we don't have words for it.
Intuition, or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
there's a vast range of very nonlinear, very multidimensional modes of experience that are available and that we are actually engaged with. We actually consist of this. But again, we are used to ignoring them because they're so nonlinear and so weird and so nuanced. And as the unfoldment process occurs, or what it consists of, is basically the development of a progressive development, or anyway, development of sensitivity to these sort of nuanced bandwidths that that we typically ignore because they're completely outside the realm of human understanding, of human discourse. We don't have words for it. We can't talk about it. We couldn't possibly talk about it because it doesn't consist of anything that could possibly be verbalized.
Just like what you talk about is radiance. is, I sort of see it as, this just presents itself.
Sure.
And it's in my face, just sort of, sometimes it's just so blatant. It's,
sure.
But it's not, it's not sensory exactly.
Yeah. Everything that is sensory is it.
Yeah.
But it is vastly beyond.
More than that.
It's vastly beyond simple anything that we categorize as sensory, and it's a continuum. It's all one thing. It's like you might say a continual spectrum.
But on that, but also, I've had heightened sensory too.
Because again, the sort of harmonics of sensory verges on extrasensory or supersensory, because it's a continuum. It's not like the one thing is here and then it stops and then something else starts. As your sensitivity develops, your sense of what is sensory, you look at anything and you experience so much more of it than you did previously, because there's all sorts of subtle nuance and harmonics and nonlinear. Again, we don't have language for it. It's kind of oblique dimensional associations, and whatever that means, right? You start trying to talk about this stuff, and you just start spinning gibberish.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's an actuality experientially, and that's the point. In fact, it's very the really powerful and direct way to be with this, and the most powerful way of noticing is not through trying to move away from sensory experience into something else, because in a large percentage, probably the vast majority of spiritual traditions, what their practices and so on consist of is essentially escapism. You're essentially moving away from something to something else. And I posit exactly the opposite of that. Go to the actuality that's presenting itself in most intimate and specific detail, and you will discover that there's more there than you're used to seeing. And that moreness will continually open into more moreness and more moreness and more moreness, and you won't split off into these kind of dualistic things where there's this one, this horrible normal world, and then there's this wonderful transcendental world over here, and you just have to kind of hold that away and try to get to that. On the contrary, every single thing that you experience is a doorway to the transcendental. It's a doorway and a presentation of the divine. And that is profoundly integrative. In spiritual theory, this is the difference between the left-hand path and the right-hand path. And I'm a staunch advocate of the left-hand path, which is integrative. The right-hand path is separative. You're separating yourself, you're separating something from something else. Left-hand path, you're saying, yes, this and this and this and. It's absolutely inclusive. It's like a black hole that eats everything. And that way you stay grounded in reality, and you don't end up in splitting off into fantasy and all these kinds of things, which isn't powerful. Reality, actuality is powerful. And if you use the immediate, specific, concrete actualities of your experience as your jumping off point, then you're working with actuality. So you're grounded. Your feet are on the fulcrum. So you have a thrusting block. You have. It gives you authority. It gives you force. It keeps it real.
This concreteness that you refer to, though, for me. Things are becoming, and I'm grasping at words here, things are becoming sort of translucent to me.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Things are becoming less things, less concrete. Things are,
sure.
There's this openness that's starting to occur.
Absolutely.
Where, I don't know, I don't know.
I hear you. That's what these other aspects and harmonics and dimensions of the specific look like and what they consist of. It looks like you discover what you thought was sort of inert and dull and actual and there, all of a sudden has all these other dimensionalities and aspects, which makes everything sort of like a rainbow.
Yeah.
And very,
yeah.
very. So it's like you get much more, and the more transforms what you thought you were starting with it to be, so to speak. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless, that is the concrete actuality. And if the concrete actuality isn't very concrete, so be it. But that still is the concrete actuality, as much as we have it. But the point being to not try to get away from something to something else, because that's one of the easiest ways to spin yourself into a little loop of fantasy where you don't really go anywhere.
So in Dogen, they, Trek show, they're supposedly, you've been given the view, you've been shown the view, and then my understanding is you're supposed to, go back to the view and sort of stay there as long as you can.
Yeah, rest in the view.
And so when John was talking about, experiences, and over here also we were talking about experiences, and I was wondering whether or not we're supposed to, I can think of a few benchmark sort of experiences, whether or not I should go back to those or just sort of count those among the multitude.
No, it's always this is the experience. What's important is this right here, right now. This is the practice. And that this is exactly itself and entirely beyond anything you can hold it to be is the view. So you be with this actuality as it is, and that as it is a very loaded phrase. It means as it actually is, which is completely beyond and irregardless of anything you may or may not think it is, or for that matter, think it isn't. So in other words, it's being with direct experience outside the context of an interpretive framework, pure and simple. That is the view, and Trecho is that practice.
And that's equally as true in deep sleep as it is in any other time.
Of course, if it happens to if you happen to be in deep sleep, then that is the actuality, and that is the view.
There's been a few times when I've lost. How do I put it? You lose the sense. You lose the sense object, and you also lose the sort of perceiver of the sense object, and there's this verb going on. So you're seeing or you're hearing or whatever.
Sure.
The foreground goes to background, and background comes to foreground.
Sure.
Somehow. It like reverses everything somehow or another.
Sure.
And those have just been such powerful experiences to me. Just you were talking about Led Zeppelin. It leaves me dazed and confused. For wonderfully.
Sure.
For a few days,
Yeah.
and I wonder, with my readings anyway, whether or not I'm supposed to go back there and try to make that happen or something. But listening to you, I don't think that's the thing.
No, those experiences are valuable, but the only place to find them is here now. Don't try to recreate them. Don't chase after anything that you suppose, that you remember, that you recall, that you anticipate. Or that you suppose is possible. Just completely relax into actuality. And in actuality, you find all that. In actuality, you find no perceiver. You find no perceived. You just find this. And this is inherently not perceived and not a perceiver. You can hold that because that is right there is an interpretive framework, a subtle one, and typically we hold it unconsciously, so we don't even know we're holding it. That's the challenge with all of these interpretive frameworks. We're not doing it on purpose. It's a subliminal orientation that we just assume to be true, and that assumption is our anchor, is our jail cell, and yet. This actuality presents absolutely no assumptions. This actuality is not telling us what it is. This is not telling you what it is. It's not telling you it's being perceived. It's not telling you there's a perceiver. It's not telling you there's an object. It's just this. Like we were talking about, it's just this, call it experience. And see the fact of that, let go into the fact of that, let go into orientationlessness, which is obvious, because there is no orientation given unless you supply it. This is not telling you that there's an up or down. This is not telling you there's an in or out. This is not telling you there's an object or a subject. It's just no labels, no explanation, no description. It's the imagination that supplies that. So if there seems to be some kind of an orientation to any degree whatsoever, subjectivity or objectivity, whatever, you can be sure that you're supplying that in your imagination somehow, subtly or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like my mind just has to clean everything up.
Yeah, and that's what the mind does. But that fact itself is also just this. The mind doing that is just this. That's just here too. And that has no labels. That is not, even though it may consist of labels and be generating labels, it itself is what? I mean, how does that happen? Where is it? What is it? Where is the thinking mind? Where is it? What's it made of? What's doing it? And even as the thinking mind is here, whatever that is, there's also so much here that's not the thinking mind, and that's just here, whatever, just as it is. You can't say how it is. As it is as it is, but it can't be said. It can't be thought. It can't be written. It can't be analyzed. And as soon as you start analyzing it, it's not this. That's just a fantasy, a thought existing within this. And fantasy and thought is completely transcendental too. What's thought? What's fantasy? Right away, that is this. And you can't say what it is, and all of a sudden it deconstructs itself. Because it isn't anything. It's not. It has no ultimate reference, unless you supply the reference, and then you supply the reference. The reference here. Then here's the reference sitting here within this, but the reference is sitting here. But this doesn't care whether the reference is sitting here or not. Doesn't affect this. And this is always this. And that's the powerful fact. And just rest in that powerful fact. And that is the entirety of Dzogchen.
Resting implies no effort.
Yeah, and even if there's effort, the effort occurs effortlessly, because what's doing it? Where does it come? Where's the effort coming from? What's doing it? What's it consist of? And then it's this.
So you just keep going back to this.
Yeah. And then you notice that you actually aren't going back to it because you never leave it. When you think you're leaving it, that's this too. And then even the leaving is no longer leaving, it's just more of this. And at that point you're bulletproof, you're Teflon. Because the thoughts and the bullshit and the frames of reference and all that are flying around, but here you are. Doesn't touch anything, doesn't affect anything, doesn't limit anything.
That's why it's liberating, because it allows for all this thinking and referencing. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because that's what this is. And everything whatsoever is this. This is completely transcendental, completely beyond the beyond, and yet actual. And anything whatsoever that can happen doesn't depart whatsoever from this, and it occurs within this and is this, and does not damage this or change it or limit it or impede it in any way whatsoever. So at first seeing that is very delicate and tenuous, and you see it, and, wow, this is amazing, and then you go off into thoughts and think, oh, I've lost it, I have to get back to it, and that's fine. So you get back to it, because here it is, of course, and sooner or later you can get back to it, and you see that, and you just repeat that cycle, and every time you see it a little more clearly and a little more integratedly, and you become more mature in your perception of what it is and what occurs within it, in its natural being what it is. And then you begin to notice that all these departures are it too. And, so all this delusion and thought, thinking and emotion and orienting and imagining is entirely, inscrutable, mysterious, indescribable, whatever, within this. It happens here, now. And this never departs from this. But you don't ever actually go anywhere. And the more you see that, the less you're threatened by these departures, and the less you interpret them as departures, until ultimately there's no more departures, because there's nowhere to go. There's just a dynamism. This presents itself with absolute dynamism and absolute instability. It's just, there's absolutely no stasis presenting. And all of this thinking and hypothesizing and getting attached and delusion and all that is actually just, sort of standing waves within all of this dynamism. But everything is dynamism. Sensory experience, everything whatsoever is this absolute dynamism. And yet what it is completely inscrutable, completely transcendental, undescribable.
This may be a very odd question. You know, I'm a teacher, and so I just wonder if it were up to you, what kind of education program would you suggest, or a training program would you suggest to help people along, other than, let's say, what you're doing?
In what context?
Well, to help people see the truth, reality, to become more aware.
It can be done within any context. The essence of that, of teaching that, is showing that whatever you're teaching, the actuality consists of more than is contained in the curriculum. So to keep pointing out that whatever is being addressed here, there's more in actuality, and bear that in mind. We're often used to dealing with, or thinking we're dealing with completenesses.
Yeah.
And to get that conceptually, we're always dealing with incompletenesses. And the actuality is complete, but the concepts are always incomplete. The concepts are always, vague indicators of these amazing actualities that cannot be captured in thought, that cannot be defined. And that can be addressed within any context, or any topic, or any discipline. Because all of these topics and disciplines, of course, refer to this. Because what else could they refer to? And so they're fine jumping off points as far as they are, but to point that out, that they are jumping off points, and that the actuality is multidimensional in a way that cannot be contained in a presentation or in a curriculum. But any starting point is fine, is equally valid.
I've been noticing that I cling less to circumstance, or what could be perceived as circumstance, than I used to, unless I really, really dislike that circumstance. I'm trying to look at something unpleasant in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But not entirely sure how to overcome that.
Right.
I'm sort of annoyed that I'm annoyed with it. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, unpleasantness isn't a problem at all. Circumstance, it's not like you need to like everything,
Yeah.
or you need to become indifferent, or you need to become boring. You can like what you like and dislike what you dislike, but the main thing is to always have a sense that there's more there. So, and even the liking or disliking is more than just liking or disliking. Everything is more than it seems. And anything can be a jumping off point to more than itself. So even something you don't like, you can trip on it or have it be an incentive or a kind of a starting point for other associations that are radically different than it. So in other words, things are not just simple and little and limited. So even something you don't like, that applies to that as well. So it is what it is, and you don't need to like it, but it is part of a spectrum of quality that just spins off and transcends itself, while still being it. It's not. This is not a matter of trying to cancel out the thing or cancel out your not liking it, but just noticing that there's more, and the moreness you might not dislike.
Yeah.
In other words, everything has many, many aspects, experientially. And the aspects that your first take on things might be aspects that you have a reaction to, but there's other aspects that you're going to actually be profoundly different, or subtly different, or whatever, than your sort of jumping off point, or the focal point, you might say. But that comes spontaneously. If the main thing is just to be loose, be with the experience loosely. Let yourself be loose with your experience. Let yourself be sort of unlocked with your experience. Just sort of, let it be dimensional, and then spontaneously this sort of reorientation occurs.
Cool. I can remember times where I was annoyed with the situation, especially recently I had this annoying job. I just had this really annoying job. And I can remember saying to myself how much I disliked it, and then saying, isn't it weird how I can dislike something so much? Wow, that's pretty funny. And then just laughing about that. So it kind of just just sort of dissolves.
Yeah, that's an instance right there where even the fact that you dislike it has other dimensions than just simply dislike. And then that's sort of looking at it from the subjective point of view. You look at the objective point of view of what it is you dislike, and it is whatever it is that you dislike it, but it's also funny and weird and has more going on there. So it's always about just letting yourself open to sort of multiple versions of things, multiple dimensionalities in experience. Because experience is never simply this or that. Experience is never dull and obvious and locked into some kind of a thing. Experience is always a whoo, just this amazing rainbow of contradictions and dimensions and doorways into other associations, and just endlessly. Any condition whatsoever that your starting point is, oh, this sucks or whatever, fine. But that's just one aspect of a vast meta-system of dimensions that just goes everywhere. And it goes into really surprising different sort of qualities. And you can let yourself be sensitive to that. Let yourself be sensitive to the sort of multidimensionality of multiple aspects that experience has. So be with things sort of loosely and let yourself free associate on it. Let yourself, don't be too locked in on this is this and that's that. Just be a little spacey almost, without needing to distance yourself from things. You can really be very intimate with things, but even as you're being intimate, you can kind of simultaneously be a little spacey with it, and then you can begin to appreciate, sort of priming the pump for noticing multidimensionality a little more.
That kind of reminds me, there's a while ago, I can remember you saying something about, is there happiness? Sure. There's also, my toe hurts, or there's also tingly colors, and there's also, there's everything. So, or is there pain? Yeah, but there's also like being interested in that spoon, or that,
right.
throw anything out there.
Exactly.
It's just
there's always
the whole thing.
Whatever is happening. There's always vastly more and other than that happening, and vastly more and other than that, and vastly more and other than that, as far as you want to take it. And this is not just theoretically, but experientially, that's the case. If you can let yourself open to it, let yourself sort of be sensitive to it or trip on it, just be with that, and then you begin to notice that things don't need to not be what they are. Things can be very specific and dull and whatever, including your reaction to it being very specific and dull and whatever. But still, even as that's happening, there's this and that, and this and that. So it's like, it's kind of like dollying back. It's like finding some little event, like say some street scene, some little event, some guy getting mad and yelling at a dog or something, but then you dolly back until you're looking at the block, and then you dolly back till you're looking at the city, and you dolly back till you're looking at the planet. And that's there. The guy's still yelling at the dog, but there's so much more simultaneously, and it all comes without needing to negate any portion of it. Because experience isn't compartmentalized. We used to thinking of, because of the way we associate with words, used to thinking of this is this and that's that and this is this, and things are sort of separate and discrete. But experience isn't like that. Really, experience is a continuum, and we experience just layers and layers and dimensions and associations and nonlinear connections and just this astounding richness. I mean, you see that when you take strong drugs. If you take acid or something like that, these things become very obvious, and it's whoa, experience is just this vast, nonlinear overload. But it's always that. It's like that all the time. We're in the habit of not noticing it because we've kind of been programmed or hypnotized, whatever, into a kind of a very linear, dull, kind of a compartmentalizing approach where we're sort of, let me focus on this, instead of simultaneously including. It doesn't deny the specific thing, but there's so much more that sort of is also concurrently a part of it. It is awesome. It's truly awesome. And that frees you from relating to your experience in terms of the narrations of like, I'm here because of such and such. And then so there's this real simple thing, I'm here, I'm waiting in this room to such and such because I'm going to talk to so-and-so and they're not here yet. Okay, yeah, that's happening, but what else is happening? It's like, everything. There's just so much. And then you don't need to sit there just beating yourself up with this one boring story of how you're sitting waiting for something or whatever. You're like, you don't know what's going on. There's too much. There's too much to even scratch the surface. without omitting or denying any portion of the narrative.
And that doesn't even include the potentiality of what's going on
Yeah,
at the same time.
of course.
I just recently read Ray Dalman in one of the books that I was talking to you about a little while ago, where he talks about emptiness being an indication of potential, of possibilities that have yet to sort of come into existence.
Yeah, and all of that is in actuality
Right.
here.
Yeah, I know. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just,
I mean, there's no limit to the fineness with which you can be with this event. There's no limit to the fineness with which you can be with it. And as you develop the ability to be with it finer and finer and finer, you are able to be with it in terms of just these little evanescent, shimmerings and bubblings and
how do you avoid getting lost, Peter?
Huh?
How do you avoid getting lost in all of that?
You do get lost, but everything comes with. So it's not like you're losing anything. You get lost in it. It's inclusive.
It would seem like you would. It's
But
just
you've
infinite.
You've always been lost. You've just had a story going that you're not.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Because it's more a matter of including everything that's here rather than denying portions of it.
Mm.
It's like when you know a language, you know the content of every book that's written in that language, because you could write it yourself, because you just string the words together. So when you know the words, you know all the books. And then reading any particular book is just reading a particular instance of stringing the words together in a particular order, which you could do.
Well, it's interesting, Peter, when I have something that I don't like, that I notice that I tend to try to narrow everything down and sort of be very specific about what it is I don't like, so that I can get a kind of a complete picture of exactly what it is I don't like, which is of course impossible.
Yeah.
But the only thing that's going on in that process is me disconnecting from reality.
Yeah.
Although that is reality itself.
Yeah.
But it's then it creates a sort of a sense of anxiety or fear about what is there that isn't in part of this narrow reality.
Yeah, exactly. You cut yourself off from noticing fullness and noticing completeness, because all qualities, all events exist in the context of fullness and completeness. That is more than them. It's more than them as you're defining it. So anything whatsoever that you don't like or that's a problem, in terms of its locus, its nexus, its focus of that particular quality that's labelable, exists in a context of more and other than it, which actually comes with, which is it too. It is the entire continuum. It's not just this, it's this and this, because this can't be actually extricated from its continuum. And so when you let yourself notice that, you still get to you can still be functional, you can still relate to specifics, but you're not relating to them in a pretended vacuum of separateness and problematicness. It's just, well, there's these conditions, but there's other conditions, and it has a very different flavor, a very different feeling tone when you let yourself notice the fullness of the continuum of more and other that always comes with any and all experience.
Yeah, but I noticed that there is a tendency, there's sort of almost like an addiction to wanting to, to go back to that isolation, that state of separating out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the challenge, You've probably heard me say many times, it's very easy to find reality. It's just hard to let go of unreality. Yeah. It's hard to let go of our addiction to censorship, of our addiction to creating these painful virtual separations in an actuality of inclusiveness and lusciousness and fullness. We should take a little break now because it's about time for that. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. It's 10 of 8.
Yeah, they're putting too much, leading too hard on that.
Yeah, there's some great stuff too.
It's really curly sometimes. The hair has been huge. It does have curl. I just washed it tonight, so thank you. I struggled so much. I love trying to get the frizz, you know, get it straight. It's like, forget it. It's stupid. Oh, I would do this thing up here and sleep in that. Yep. One day I was getting my hair done.
Yeah.
I mean, if that school, I'm going to find that there's another school that says just ignore it and forget it.
My hair's naturally curly. You don't have to do all this. I would have had a perm one.
Yeah, every time you say I
You
am,
don't really need a perm. You sure you want one? I said, yeah. I want it to be all evenly curly. Well, it turned into this big afro. It was terrible. And that was right before we came to California. As soon as we got here, about a month later, I went to a hairdresser in the city, and I said, and it had grown out a little bit, just about this much out, right? I said, I want you to take all the perm out. He says, you're not going to have any hair left. It's going to be about this long all around. I said, that's fine. My hair literally was just this short all around. I'm walking down with a friend who just got her hair cut really short. I'll tell her after in Berkeley, we got hit on by so many women. It was so funny. I thought I'm perfect. Oh, Eastern. Welcome to California. She was also from the East Coast. So we looked at each other and we thought, oh, this is too funny. Well, now we know we're living in California. Not that there aren't any lesbians and gays on the East Coast, but and also not so obviously, you know?
yeah, I understand.
I have. But it's not on the outside, it's not dressed up so much to be looking like a lesbian or a gay man. Oh, they are out there. Everywhere. Okay, these two knitted together. No, these two. Okay.
Defining myself. And I've done fairly well at it now.
More eating going on in there, I hear. You hear all that? Eating and drinking, just partying, whoring around. I mean, really, drunkards over in the next room, huh? A bunch of drunkards. Sugar drunks.
Sugar drunks, for sure.
You know, sweets.
That's for sure.
I wish I could have some This is really good wine. I don't usually have red wine. I do, but white comes, either of them can give me a headache, so it depends. This one is also very tasty.
Yeah. No, it's just been a bad day, blood sugar.
Often bring wine with you.
It helps to cut the stuff in my lower throat from the radiation.
Oh, yeah.
I still have a lot of thick saliva and it just sometimes
Oh, really?
I can't do anything about it. It just almost gags me.
Yeah, Peter has a hard time, his tongue also got warped. Yeah, his tongue got warped.
Warped?
Yeah,
Warped
it's,
the tongue.
yeah, it's shortened. He'll show you. It's shortened on one side, see?
Wow.
His finger. And so, and his tongue, the muscles back there don't work right sometimes because of this warping that happened. So sometimes he'll just, you'll notice it in his speech. They'll start talking if it comes. Doesn't happen as much as it used to. Yeah, you lucked out then.
It probably got better since they did him.
His salivary glands got fried out too, so
Yeah,
they were damaged.
compromised. Yeah.
And for a long time, he walked around with a big water bottle. He had to take sips all day long. Now he doesn't seem to need it so much.
Well,
He
in the
needs
middle of the
it to
night,
eat.
it's just, I don't even, I quick fight me.
Yeah.
You know, so I wake up in the middle of the night and super dry mouth.
Yeah. Well, Peter goes to sleep with that fluoride stuff. Puts him on his teeth. And he very often wakes up with sort of this white filmy stuff, you know, and just sort of dry and yucky. So it's a brush his teeth and
You know the worst part about that is, it's my relationships with my wife. We don't kiss this often. Because I have that.
yeah, no, we don't either. We do, but we don't no more time.
Right. I didn't mean to ask that, but I mean.
No, but it's true. It's a very specific thing, and it used to be one of our favorite things.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that
me
doesn't
too.
happen anymore. But you know, but there's other closenesses now. So.
No, I understand.
So it's-
I miss that.
Yeah, I think Peter does too. I'm much more adaptable with drinks though. So when one thing is gone, just something else shows up. My attention can be diverted very quickly and easily, and I can enjoy the next thing just because it's new.
Wow.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
What's your sign? What do you?
Well, I'm a Scorpio on the cusp of Sagittarius, Aries moon, and Libra rising.
Okay.
So, but I'm very changeable, and I don't know if you know the Enneagram at all.
I don't.
No?
I don't. No. I've seen it once, but that was long ago.
Yeah.
How would you type yourself on that one?
What?
How would you self-type on
Well, everybody who knows me has tagged me as a 7 with a 6 and an 8 wing. You can tell when my 8 wing comes out because I'm in your face. It's like, and it's very idealistic. Eights are very idealistic. And the 6 is the helpful thing, which also always shows up on me too. I'm always trying to be helpful. And it comes automatically. I don't have to think about it. Which made me a great little mommy when my younger siblings came along. In fact, my youngest brother, for the longest time, because we lived with my grandmother too, my mother's mother. So he, for a long time, thought he had 3 mothers. He called me mommy, he called my mother mama, and he called, of course, he called abuela. My grandmother was mamá de ella, which was what all the cousins called her. She was the mother over there. That's what it translates to in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you say? What is it called?
Mamá de allá. Mamá de allá. Allá means over there. De allá, of over there.
Yeah.
And so my little brother, he was maybe just about to enter kindergarten or something, and I said, call me Louie, because your friends are going to think it's weird. And he said, but he kept thinking I was mommy. And so I said, well, I am your little mommy, but I'm not really your mommy, I'm your sister. Oh, he's
Sounds
still,
wonderful.
yeah, and he still signs, sometimes he signs his email to me, him and my youngest sister. They sign your baby brother, your baby sister. Of course, you know. They're in their late 40s,
I got a couple sisters that do that too.
Yeah. Baby sis. Yeah, I think so too. I enjoy being a big sister. And I remember when my youngest sister was born, my mother comes from the hospital with her and hands me this beautiful doll because she was afraid I'd be jealous and all that. And I looked at the doll and I looked at my little sister and I handed my mother the doll and I said, I'll take the baby. You can have the doll. She says she'll never forget that because it was like I looked at the doll, I looked at the baby, like I was getting a raw deal. She was getting the better deal, I thought.
Yeah.
And that's what I knew. It's funny how these things click with you when you're a kid. Like I could see when one of our daughters, she was going to be an artist. And it just happened. It was a moment when she was little when I could just see, this girl's going to always be putting color on the same thing. painting images and faces.
Very short time where my mother was a very independent woman, and so she threw all of us out to the window, which she really encouraged us to go find our own lives, you know, but
I wish my mother had been more independent. Would have been a better role model for me. It's always, the grass is always greener.
I was going to say, now I wish that were, you know, we were like sort of closer in a way.
Yeah. We've had to
Especially
make
this
an
time of
effort.
year.
Yeah, we've had to make an effort. We're trying to do at least one family reunion once every other year, if not every year.
Wow.
It's 10 people or even 9.
It's hard to get together.
Yeah, it is.
Especially if they're living in different places.
Yeah.
Lily, do you still have relatives?
I have 2 cousins who went back. They didn't like living in the United States. One went back after having been married here, had a PhD from somewhere in Pennsylvania. I forget which college he went to. The other one had gone to college too, the youngest, and he went back. He was about 6 months younger than I am, and they didn't like living in the American culture. One who had lived here and was married. He got divorced, went to Peru thinking that maybe it was just the Latin thing he wanted, and married a woman there, and he didn't like it there either. So she and he went to Cuba, and she likes it there. And their sister, who lives in South Florida, she goes to Cuba every now and then to visit them both.
How is Cuba these days?
I don't know. Yeah. She goes.
Can you go there?
I don't know. I probably could get a permit to go there, a visa to go there as a relative to my cousins. But you know, anyone can go there as long as they go through Mexico or Canada.
Yeah.
And you better hope they don't stamp your passport in Cuba, which they like to do. They like to stamp the American passports. So it's kind of
What happens if they do?
Now, I think the U.S. doesn't like it a whole lot.
It's technically illegal to go to Cuba.
Yeah, they won't incarcerate. Yeah, it's illegal.
I think so, but I don't know. I don't know what the.
Well, that keeps changing, though.
Yeah, I don't know what the status is.
Well, so do they actually?
Like charitable groups can go.
Do they actually do anything?
No, they can, but they don't. We've had friends who went there like for bike tours, and they went through Mexico, and they weren't very happy that the government had immigration had stamped their card, but hey, what are you gonna do?
It just seems like ancient history, you know?
It does.
Tell me about it. I'm so fed up with it. It's bullshit.
Politics.
Politics. You know, the astronauts, all that go up there and see this marble that we live on, have the same take on it. It's like, you know, there aren't any fences.
There's no lines drawn on the ground.
There are no lines on that globe down there.
I mean, a number of them are pretty spiritual.
Yeah, they do. It transforms them.
Yeah.
Because they realize that not only that, but we're insignificant. We think ourselves to be so important and like the only intelligence on the universe. I'd say we're probably the only thing that isn't. Everything else has its own inherent intelligence. It doesn't get in its own way.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm happy to kind of
think there were lines on the ground about the states.
I probably should go.
You just haven't seen that.
Yeah, I kept going, I keep crossing over this border, like, I just miss it every
We went
time.
to
Where's the red line?
Costa Rica last year, I guess, or whatever. We flew over Cuba.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, that was interesting because it's just this long, it looks like mostly like a jungle, you know, with a few hilltops.
Yeah.
It's very green.
It's like volcanic island. It's like Hawaii.
It's
the
like
same
Jamaica.
latitude, too.
The topography is a lot like Jamaica. It's mountainy and
Jamaica
and jungle.
or Hawaii. Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Where? Hawaii? Oh, Cuba. You should. You don't have a dual passport anymore, right? You don't have a Canadian.
You've got sparkly hair. I like it.
Yes.
It's not hard to comb your hair or to wash it.
Because it's one side.
What? They're tied in there somehow. You'll outgrow them, I guess, but they eventually come out.
Yeah, they grow out.
Yeah. I think I'll do that.
I'll do it. I was actually thinking of opening a business.
You can experiment on me.
Well, it's like a trend.
You gotta tie a bunch of them. I'm getting rather thin up here, so maybe you can tie some extras.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's
I like that.
It's very playful.
Yeah.
I like playful.
well, people are looking at me like. And then they
Were you wrapping up some? You were wrapping up some presents, and you got all this stuff all over you. What is it?
I just thought it was more unfolding going on.
Yeah. It's psychedelic. Somebody put something in the soup.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
A few mushrooms in the soup.
Well, a thing like that happened to, well, not a thing like that, but
Something.
one of the last times we were at the Hillside Club, Jeremy and I both had a weird experience where it suddenly seemed like everything was like dissolving. We were wondering like what happened, like the same exact experience. We'll talk about it later. Yeah.
Everything looked all visually insane.
Really? While you were sitting there?
Yeah,
Listening to Peter.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Like, describe it.
Everything was like, I don't know.
Blurry?
It become
Kind of
hazy,
vibrating.
like there was fog in the room, and then
Oh, really? Blurry like almost.
Yeah, and everything would kind of turn like this, like the it was like the blacks. Like it's like
invert.
kind of it reminded me of how you can Photoshop something where you can make the blacks of the photograph change to a specific color. So it was like suddenly all the blacks of that would be like green.
Yeah,
Really?
right. It'd be green and red.
And like they had those green flashy green and red lights in there.
Oh yeah, those are
flashing around.
great.
But it was like, for some reason, everything was like all floaty and creepy.
Those like sort of twirling colors.
Yeah, the lights and that, yeah.
It was just weird.
John set up all over. He had like 6 of them going. I
Were
wonder if he got rid of all of
them?
them.
Were those specific?
Nope, we have them all.
He still has them all?
I thought that was
Maybe we
pretty
could
cool.
get
I think the weirdest that we
We
both
could talk to
experienced
Open
the same
Secret.
thing.
Yeah, at the same exact
yeah.
time.
It was more.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah. That was absurdly weird.
You should take those with you wherever you go.
Yeah, let's bring them out now. Weird funny experiences.
That's right. We want to have our psychedelic experiences without having to take any easy drugs. Well,
Even
right.
without those.
Yeah, that's true.
This break is like one of those football games where they just run down the clock.
You have game over. Ding dongs.
Ding here.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Good job. See,
Well, over here,
coming.
too.
Ah,
We're well trained out
the
here.
ants are coming.
Ring a bell.
You're right. We're a bunch of chatty Cathys today, aren't we? Really? Boy, child?
I had 3 foster sisters at the same time. They were mom and real sisters. And I was ahead of them by 8 years.
Welcome back.
They come as part of the
A good way to play with more another is watch people talking about something and think of all the things they aren't talking about that they could be talking about, and how those are just as true and just as relevant as what they happen to be talking about and focusing their attention on. Not just them, I mean you as well when you're in a conversation. So when you say something, think of all the other things you could have said. And then the things that are unsayable that you could have been with. And it all comes with it all.
I'm always doing that. You don't ever hear anything I say.
It's no response.
That's right.
It seems like the mind fights back when it considers that there is that there are innumerable other things going on at any one particular time, and so that there seems to arise, or at least the argument seems to arise in the mind that, you know, if you just stopped and considered everything, if you were, you know, if you left yourself open to everything, you know, that's going on at any particular time, you'd lose yourself. You couldn't handle what it is that you ever needed to do. You know, you'd become lost. And yet, my experience is that that doesn't happen at all.
No, because everything is very specific. In other words, just because there's no way you could comprehensively describe everything in your field of experience right at the moment, it still is very specifically what it is. It's not like a vague cloud that you can't orient to. So, in other words, things don't need to be linear. Things don't need to be delineated in order to be actual and specific. And it's that actuality and specific that enables practicality, because you function and orient in terms of specifics and actuality. So you can walk from here into the kitchen without banging into the wall because you can see where the door is. Now, seeing where the door is not rational. It's not linear. The presence of the door and the presence of the wall and your ability to walk through it are all completely inconceivable and undescribable. And yet, nonetheless, you can do it. So it doesn't need to be. Functioning is not a function of rationality. Functioning is not efficiency, and functioning and effectiveness is not a function of thought. It's not a function of words. You know, you can walk, you can run, you can dance, and you don't do it by thinking about it. You know, if you wanted to walk across the room, you wouldn't think, well, let me see now, which muscle do I move first? Let's see, I have to move my left foot first, and then I put it down. Okay, now I have to. Okay, now it's down. Good. Now I have to shift to the right. You know, it's not like that, is it? You just do it. And that doing is completely irrational, completely non-linear, completely holistic. It's direct energy engagement, you might call it. And functioning experience is direct energy engagement. Functioning is by direct energy engagement and does not require analysis. And if it does, if analysis is helpful, analysis is available. If you want to read a recipe or read how to do something, you can do so.
And it's surprising, given all the different things that are sort of, considering it's not possible, impossibility, I mean, all the different things that are sort of going on at any one particular time. The things, I don't know, you can sort of handle everything that comes up.
Yeah, because
without really thinking about it. I mean,
yeah, because you have capability, you have functionality, you have intelligence, and intelligence is not a byproduct of thought. It's not a byproduct of rationality. It's inherent in your system that you are. And thought is a product. Thought is a rational thought or argument, let's say, is a product. It's an outcome. It's not actually a means to any end. It's you can think and argue and construct logically because you're intelligent. Your intelligence does not arise because you think and structure logically. Your intelligence is not a byproduct. Your intelligence is inherent. And because of that, then you can do this. And that same intelligence enables you to walk, enables you to drive a car, enables you to do whatever you can do. Any talents you have, suppose you're, whatever. Suppose you're a gifted musician or whatever. How does that happen? Well, it's just because you have that functionality because of the nature of your intelligence. And you may have potentials in your intelligence that you've never even exercised. But none of that is a byproduct of logic or of rationality or of words.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before and a couple other times, and just sort of relaxing, and I do anyway. It's only at certain sort of times it is, but everything that needs to get done just gets done. I'm just not in control. I'm just sort of watching the whole thing happening in front of me.
Of course, and even the things that you are in control of, you're not in control of being in control. So suppose you decide to think about something, you didn't decide to decide about it. I mean, ultimately, everything arises and originates mysteriously.
Absolutely.
Even if it is a seemingly intensive, self-aware, linear process of argument and refinement and observation and reasoning and so on, still the entire thing exists within a milieu and originates from a milieu. It's entirely mysterious. So how that carefulness is being executed is wholly not careful. It's wholly just, how does that happen? Where does that come from?
And it seems to today, at least for me these days, I'm finding my way to the connection between that capability to do whatever needs to get done with this.
Yeah.
That seems to be one in part and parcel of the same. So this ability to sort of like let go into this becomes this.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying.
That's good. Makes sense.
It's okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because letting go into this is really a mind game, and because you actually are always in this, you have always letting go into this is always a done deal, and so the mind that thinks it has to let go into this and it has to figure out how to do that is playing a game with itself that exists in this, in the fait accompli of. And so ultimately, you learn how to let go into this by noticing that you already have, rather than by needing to find the artifice of how to do it. And as you develop skill in this becomes more and more available to you. It becomes more and more a matter of, instead of trying to figure out how to do it, you just look over here and you notice that it's already done. So it becomes a matter of more of letting go of process than of executing process, or bypassing process, looking at a context that's outside of process and noticing what's going on there, and noticing that it looks like that looks an awful lot like what it is I think I'm trying to accomplish here, and there it is sitting there, and it's in my experience because I'm experiencing it. So instead of being engaged in all this process, why not simply be with that, and I will have achieved that which the process is attempting to. Yeah. So it becomes a kind of a letting go of needing to do it, and letting yourself notice the ways in which it's already the case. And when you begin to notice ways in which it's already the case, you begin to notice that in actual fact that's true across the board. There's no way in which that's not the case. And then, of course, done deal.
Well, it seems that's actually the process of integration, isn't it? Just
sure.
Areas in which that still is in question, and exploring them in order to see that in fact that's true.
And procedurally, in terms of process, our greatest ally is always to look outside of any point of focus. So whatever we're interested in is here.
Mm.
It's always of enormous advantage to look what's happening over here, because it will prove to be germane.
The exact opposite of what we intuitively think we should do.
Yeah, right. Especially in terms of mental processes, the mind is very arrogant and self-important, and it thinks that it wants to run everything and do everything. And in actual fact, the mind is a fairly small event within the vast field of experience, of reality. And simply noticing that fact frees you from this addiction to depending upon the mind, and disempowers the mind in a gentle way, and it lets it down nicely, because you don't need to be fighting with the mind. You just simply go over here where mind is irrelevant, and mind at that context obviously is irrelevant, and so it sort of either lets go or continues churning away doing its thing, but it becomes a small event within the fullness of your being, as opposed to a big urgent process that you're grappling with that you need to somehow sort out. You can't reason your way into completeness. You can't reason your way into freedom or logic or transcendence. But then you don't need to, so you already have it over here, so that's good news.
It seems, though, that the mind, in those brief moments when you're sort of saying, wow, the mind sort of wants to come in and clean things up.
Sure.
Tie up loose ends.
Yeah.
Make sense. Order things.
Sure.
Let's create a hierarchy.
That's his job.
Yeah, and it just, and when that starts up, then all that other stuff just sort of fades into the distance somehow or another, and then I'm all wound up in thinking, ordering. And then, like a number of people said, and then it's in between the thoughts that this shows up again.
Sure. In between the thoughts, around the thoughts,
Yeah.
the thoughts exist within a vast field. It's like a TV. The TV program is on and it's right there, but the TV's in a room, and there's totally nothing to do with the TV. So whatever's happening on the TV is fine, but what's happening over here? Nothing to do with the TV. This computer screen's here, but what's happening on the computer screen is fine, but what's over here has absolutely nothing to do with that.
You can
There's no conflict. It's just different. And this is me too, just like this is. And the same with the mind. So the mind is doing its thing, with whatever degree of feverishness and obsessiveness or whatever. But that's an event that's happening in a context that is very much other than that. And that it includes, it's very much equally present. And in fact, in terms of quantity, the mind is the rational mind, the thinking mind is vastly overshadowed by the volume of non-mental, non-rational experience.
Again, you can just dolly back.
Yeah, dolly back, exactly.
Same as the guy with the dog. That's all the mind is. It's a guy with a dog.
Well, it just really seems underpowered for the task.
Well, it is. That's the point. It is. It is.
Commodore 64.
Yeah. But fortunately, it's not really needed for any important task. The important task is already taken care of, and fortunately, it inherently has all the power it needs for that taken care. Inherently.
Inherently, yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And since that's the case, in actuality, right here, right now, that's noticeable. And when you notice that fact, it's like, oh, okay, cool. and you can relax.
Well, it's interesting how thought has, deluded us into believing it's such an important linchpin in the puzzle, and in fact it's of no consequence.
Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting artifact of the modern human species that we function that way. All of this addiction to narration and interpretation and semantic context. Context. You look at these politicians spewing lies on the screens, and who gives a shit? And yet millions of people think it really matters.
It's very clear it doesn't mean anything.
I'm afraid the educational system has a little part to play in that.
No, absolutely, the whole thing. It's this chaotically monolithic system that is semantically addicted to the fantasy that semantics are all important. The semantic relating to reality through semantic analysis is primary, and in actuality it's not. It may be a useful tool, a useful adjunct in some areas, and so on and so forth, sure, but it's just a tool. It doesn't actually do anything. And most fundamentally, it cannot capture reality. Truth cannot be put in words. So therefore, anything whatsoever that is put in words is partial, i.e. inaccurate, i.e. essentially a lie, in fact, if not an intention. Just by inaccuracy. So it's anyone that says something is such and such a way, they're wrong. Just inherently, just because language cannot capture the way it actually is. It can't be done. And so, unless you know that, if you believe, oh, it is that way, oh, okay, great, so let me readjust things, because things are that way, the way he's saying. It's like, no, they're not.
It's interesting that in 1535 you would have been guillotined.
We all would have been.
We all would have been. Good point.
That's interesting.
It was how we were. Here we are again.
We would have all been
Yes.
the alchemical society.
Yeah.
Better off without it anyway. Our heads.
Our heads, yes. You ever seen a chicken without its head?
I was looking at that today.
Running around
just
everywhere.
today, actually.
It's a degree of anxiety.
We're running around like chickens with our heads cut off and,
You need to say that stuff again.
Peter, I've been thinking recently of watching the unconscious mind, and that's been sort of in the forefront of my consciousness. And I can't, number one, I can't find it.
Right.
And number two, I don't believe in it. Number three, I believe it's just a modern 20th century substitute for God.
Right.
And number 4 and 5 and 6 have been going on for a few weeks here. But on the other hand, there are things that are not in my present field of awareness.
Right.
But they turn up, and I don't see any reason for positing the machinations of an unconscious mind manipulating these things,
right,
any more than just experiences happening.
Right. Well, it boils down to just experiences happening. It really becomes a question of what you're holding the unconscious mind to be, or how you're defining that notion, what you think it refers to. And I would say the unconscious mind refers to any aspects of experience which are undescribable, hence unthinkable. And the conscious mind is that which is thinkable. The conscious mind deals with that which is thinkable and describable.
Okay.
So obviously there's a profound interrelationship and overlap there.
Well, that's a meaningful differentiation.
Yeah. So much of our actual experience is very nonlinear, very undescribable, and yet we are very actively and positively engaged with it very intelligently, but not rationally. And so that is essentially what I would characterize as the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
By that definition, surely everything is unconscious.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of overlap.
Because there's nothing describable.
No, but the conscious mind creates a terrain of describability through kind of a process of averaging.
Yeah, it does. It makes descriptions.
Yeah, through a kind of a process of averaging and grouping of loose sets of similarities and differences, of characteristics that are themselves wholly elusive and multidimensional, so that the descriptions and the groupings in these sets and groupings of similar and dissimilar and all that doesn't actually capture the nuances and the fullness of what anything actually is, but in terms of very loosely speaking, kind of approaches it. It's like dealing with things in terms of statistics and averages instead of particularities.
Yeah.
It's you can say things. You can say the average. You can talk about things statistically, but any given actuality will not be a statistic. It will be exactly itself, regardless of what the statistics say, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's analogous to the way the way the mind pretends to be able to describe things. It describes things by heavy-handed censorship, by leaving out vast areas of indeterminacy and multidimensionality, and by latching on to certain specifics that it holds as being delineatable.
Abstractions.
Yeah.
Modeling, frameworks.
Yeah. And then groupings of qualities that are attributed to experience, with the assumption that there's some relevance there.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? I mean, moving from subjectivity to objectivity, it's kind of a big jump.
I mean, to a big extent, to a very big extent, the entire spiritual problem rests on these issues, because I think that to a large extent the worldviews that we hold as true are basically describable, at least to an extent. And when we see that the actuality that we think we're describing with these worldviews is undescribable and transcends the range of our describability, is when we become free from these worldviews, because we see their partiality and their inadequacy. So in short, when you move from thinking the conscious mind's mode is potentially true and accurate to seeing that it can't be because it cannot describe actuality, and all worldviews are essentially to some degree describable. When you see that actuality is wholly indescribable, wholly multidimensional, you discover the actuality of this multidimensionality, then you're free of worldviews, because no worldview can possibly capture this multidimensionality as it is, as it actually exists. So that in that seeing, in that direct observation, in that self-verifying presentational fact, you're freed from worldviews. Not from generating them, because that's what the mind does, but you're free from holding them to be true, concrete, actual.
Yes, the unconscious mind is sort of an icon generated by the conscious mind to explain something that is beyond itself.
Yeah,
and in that
sure.
sense, I'm sort of equating that to the old ideas of deities, which we did the same thing with them.
Yeah,
it's really very little different. They were making us do things. Now the unconscious mind is making us do things, but what's happening is happening.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. That's a good way of putting it. Sure. Yeah.
But there are some unconscious things though that you can't be conscious of, that absolutely rely upon like things like digestion and breathing and, you know, heart and things moving up and down into sort of the spine, although, you know, what those things really are, I mean, who the hell knows?
I used to wonder if I have a brain because I've never seen it. Or if I have a heart because
Bring
I've
me a
never
knife
seen
and
it,
I'll tell
I've
you.
never used it.
Well, let's look into that.
Let's pit his brain first.
Poor frogs.
We did this.
But this is like the dining room in there. Is the dining room still there or not? Is the brain still there or not? That's what I was thinking. You know, the whole worldview of unconscious mind is that it sort of takes care of the things that we don't see right now. But that's because we believe that the things that are not in our experience really exist somewhere, and then the unconscious mind is posited as sort of the
Right.
holder, maintainer, you know.
Yeah, and all of that's a worldview. All that's
All
just a
that's
hypothesis.
worldview generated by the conscious mind, which is,
Right.
of course, itself beyond either conscious or unconscious.
Right.
All gets confusing but amusing. But practically speaking, the reason I'm getting into that is because so much of my thinking as a 20th century person is really posited on a belief system in the unconscious and what it does.
Right.
I mean, an awful, my worldview, a whole lot of that, it's just contaminated with that.
Yeah. Yeah, the only antidote is go into direct experience.
Right,
And direct experience is not of any age.
right.
It's an actuality that displays and conveys itself.
Well, also even in ways that we don't experience consciously. I mean, we don't know them consciously.
What does know them consciously mean?
Well, like deep sleep, you know, we've been talking about that today.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly people respond to something that, in a very powerful, positive way from our, at least our waking experience of how we feel after deep sleep. So
Right.
we have a sense that something has occurred that we haven't experienced in a conscious way. So I don't know. I mean, it's not necessary to all I'm saying really is that I don't think it matters a great deal. I don't think it matters that we experience it in a conscious way, or even some way that we can somehow tag with conscious meaning or something like that.
Oh no, of course not. Obviously, all that matters of experience is that it is. That it is as it is, and that is it's the totality of its process.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that, or asking about, is that we don't experience it in any usual conscious way has nothing to do with whether it is or isn't.
Well,
Whether it
yeah, well,
You said anything?
it is or isn't as it is or isn't, and it is or isn't as it is or isn't experientially. And whether you want to qualify that as conscious or not conscious or this or that or the other is moot.
Yeah, I agree. That's what
So
I'm
deep
saying.
sleep is what it is by being what it is, as it is, regardless of how you qualify that as I don't experience it, or I do experience it, or I this, or I that, or blah, 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 blah. It still is what it is, and that's all that matters. And what that is not necessarily a single thing. What that is liable to be a constant process of metamorphosis and unfolding, as all experience is.
you, Dodo.
Could
Me
you
too.
repeat
Yeah, repeat that again.
Fizzing. Fizzing.
I didn't know what any of that meant.
I mean, out of that you brought up, really underneath all of that are two questions. What's experience and what's consciousness? And those two are completely interchangeable and really the same thing.
Well, there's only one thing,
Yes.
which is this. And so experience refers to this, and consciousness refers to this. Consciousness is often referred to as some subset of this. There is consciousness within experience, or experiences as a result of consciousness or something. But all of that is just sophistry. Because this is, and because this is, we can posit all kinds of things. But the positing is about this. So you haven't augmented the fundamental fact that this is, and that's the whole story right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is, however it is it's the totality of its process. That's what I was trying to say. Whether you qualify it as being conscious awareness or this or that or the other is irrelevant. However it is its process. So for example, if you would qualify your experience as, oh, I'm ignorant, I'm a fool, I'm stuck in the conscious mind. I have a sense of, I'm stuck in worldviews. I'm a spiritual ignoramus and blah 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 blah. Then that's just a description of an inaccurate description of your process, which is the totality of this doing its thing. And likewise, if you're in a state of unfoldment and you're experiencing all sorts of transcendental conditions and you're awake during all the waking, deep sleep and dreams and all this other stuff, that's the same thing. It's just, okay, that's the totality of the process of this being what it is. Because what this is can look like anything. And that is its process. Its process is being what it is, which includes whatever it happens to look like at the moment.
So back to the point about unconsciousness, I think there's an unanswered question, at least implicit in that is, are there things that I'm not conscious of that are real?
It depends what you mean by I'm not conscious of. Everything that has existence is real. And existence means existing experientially, because experience is the only existence there is. But experience is a very subtle thing. Experience can have, experience experience is able to be with itself in many ways. And exactly what's going on is not amenable to pinning it down.
Right. So there's a question in the mind of when I look at this, or when I think I'm looking at this, am I seeing this, or is there something that's escaping my view? I mean,
but escaping your view is not a either yes or no thing. It's all shades of gray. Experience is a continuum. You look at your field of vision, you say, what am I seeing? Well, I'm certainly seeing what I'm focusing on.
mm-hmm.
And then things way over here, I'm seeing less, but I'm seeing them. Things way, way over there, I'm hardly seeing them at all, but I'm seeing them. And at what point am I not seeing? And there's a vast area over there where I don't know, maybe I'm seeing and maybe I'm not. It's pretty hazy, it's pretty dim, it's pretty indeterminate. But so it's not, yeah, I'm seeing it or I'm not seeing it. It's like, it's this continuum. And experience is like this. There's this, I guess it's called, what's it called? The threshold of liminality or something, I don't know what. But where it's not like you're in your awareness or not. It's a kind of there's this vast twilight area where things kind of are and aren't. in subtle ways, and all of that is very difficult. It's impossible to pin down, and yet that's the nature of the beast.
And all of that is this.
All of that is this. This
There's
is
not
that.
some this and some
No, this is
fuzzy
that is the nature of this.
everything.
This is with itself indeterminately, and in that indeterminacy is all shades of grey. And yet, in it being that way, is its process, is its nature. It's completely doing what it does 100%, always. And there's no way of assessing it or figuring out what it's doing or how it's doing it by looking at it or trying to second guess it or analyze it.
So then when we use the word this or the word it, we're there. Part of the baggage that sort of comes with those words is that there's something that's definitive. There's something that has borders to it. There's a boundary.
Right.
We actually know what we're talking about.
Well, that's why it's important to keep the notion as it is, or as it actually is in there. This as it is. In other words, this in the way that it is, which includes the degree to which it is a this or not. The actuality in the way that it is that, or the ways that it is that. And I mean, I use a word that I hope captures a lot of, or implies a lot of these aspects, multidimensionality. So there's ways in which this is, there's ways in which this isn't, there's ways in which this both is and isn't, there's ways in which this is, cancels itself out. This has so many irrational, nonlinear, inconceivable modes that are unfindable, unspecifiable, and yet they are what they are, to the extent they are that. This is not a simple thing. This is an infinite, completely transcendental thing. By transcendental, I mean exactly this, that you can't pin down what this is, or even the way that it is, or not, or both. It's just beyond. It's utterly beyond. It's utterly transcendental. It's utterly beyond grasping in any way whatsoever.
And yet, and I'm making a huge assumption here, and pardon me for doing so, but to a person like you, that doesn't bother you. You're not that. So what?
Well, it doesn't. More than that. Much more than that.
Oh, great, thank you. But for most of the people, the rest of the people in the room, we're sort of miffed about all of that. It's like, oh wow, doesn't that sort of bother you that you can't pin things down, that you don't know what things are? It makes me wonder.
That's our greatest advantage. That's the good news. That's the reward. That's the prize. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's the escape hatch.
See, I think if that's something that a number of us could truly sort of let go, is that would open a lot of doors.
Sure.
No? Did you say? No. Okay. Well, we have a dissenter over here in the corner. But I think for me, it would.
Right.
Because there's. That's still part of for lack of a better word, that's grasping. At least.
So what is?
But it's part of mythology.
Wait. What specifically? Put everything you just put it more sort of concisely in a statement, or a question, or a conundrum or something, if you would, so I can see exactly what you're.
Right. Yeah.
So that ambiguity doesn't bother me.
Yes.
Or that it does bother you, or that it does bother you, is or
yes.
implies or what?
Yeah. So the fact that I can't pin things down. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So the fact that I can't pin things down is bothersome, more than bothersome.
Okay.
Then I don't know what things are, and I don't know how to be and how to think, and
right.
all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So,
okay. You're wanting to know what things are is wanting to be in a jail cell. You're wanting to know what things are is wanting to be in a one-dimensional world. The fact that you can't and you don't is freedom. You're out of the jail cell. You're not locked into anything. I mean, this is the very essence of liberation. This is the very essence. This is the very mechanism that generates liberation. Is that things being exactly what they are is unlimited, as opposed to limited. Like, you ask the Zen master, what's enlightenment? He says the tree in the courtyard. He means exactly that. The tree in the courtyard is absolute unlimitedness. It's not just a tree in a courtyard. If it was just a tree in a courtyard and you could know that, I mean, how boring, how dull. That's the horror. That's the horror of life, according to the fantasy of human delusion of materialistic philosophy. Things are just things. Consciousness is just an accidental byproduct of some biochemistry that happens to be going on in this precarious body that's falling apart and so on and so forth. And what a horror show. It's a horror show, and it's not true. The fact that it's not true is the greatest piece of good news. What is true? Exactly this. What is true is this. This is unlimitedness.
That dirty Kleenex again.
Peter, to put it in terms of what he was saying, though, when you said, what was it exactly you said, that you don't like not knowing, being able to pin things down. Okay, I can relate to that, because there are times when, I wish Peter wouldn't spill water all over the floor. And he does frequently. Okay, so but as the thought is coming to me, I wish Peter didn't spill water all over the floor. I also happen to notice that Peter does spill water all over the floor, and it just so happens it's in my nature to come right after him picking it up. So it works itself out. In other words, I can still continue to want that Peter didn't spill water on the floor, but it doesn't mean anything. Being bothered by it doesn't make it bothersome. Does that make sense?
Sure.
In other words, it's just what it is, and in a second later it's gone. So it's not bothering me anymore. Yeah. So it's thinking
and it's even more
that
than
you should
that.
Be something other than that kind of person. Yeah. I'm that kind of person. It bothers me. Yeah.
But you are more than that kind of person.
Exactly.
And that is liberation. Sure, it bothers you that water gets spilled, but you're also more than that. So you're not trapped or stuck by that fact. That fact is just a fact that's not even really a fact, because you're so much more than that that fact isn't even true. Because it doesn't capture you.
Yeah.
So nothing is just that. If it was just that, how horrible. Anything whatsoever is that, but that is the totality, that is infinity. And that fact is the fact of ambiguity, inherent indeterminacy, or let's say inclusiveness of alternative interpretations from an interpretive point of view. And that's the good news. That's really the good news, because that is empowerment. That is freedom. You're not locked in. You're not stuck with a paltry, limited existence of separation, separate definabilities.
I can empathize with the problem of not liking the business that you can't pin something down.
Right.
Because I can remember when I first started hearing you talk about it, I felt that in my experience I could pin down a whole lot of things.
Sure.
And I think you have to go to the lab course over a period of time to begin to examine these things that we thought we could pin down and begin to realize, oh my God, I can't pin it down. And then another one comes up, and then another one comes up.
Yeah.
But I think the lab course is necessary.
It is. You have to see the truth of that fact. It's not the theory of it that counts. It's the evidence. It's the fact that this is transcendental. Not that there's a theory that this is transcendental. It's that this actually is transcendental, which means that when you go trying to pin it down, you can't. And you can't not because you're a fuck up. You can't because this is not pinnable down. It can't be done. It's not that kind of critter. It's not that. That's not the nature of the beast.
It doesn't exclude the fuck up.
I was going to say,
absolutely.
you can still be a fuck up, and that's okay.
Oh, of course, of course.
You can be content with that.
Everything is what it is, but what it is cannot be said or thought, which is indeterminacy. And yet there's specificity there. It is exactly what it is. You know, the tree in the courtyard is exactly the tree in the courtyard. It is exactly that. We're not like saying, it's not that. It is exactly that. It's explicit. It's specific. But in that specific, you can't actually pin it down. You can't define it. Because it's infinite. That specific is a specific infinity. And what we have here is a field of infinities. Everything you look at is an infinity. And the nature of an infinity is you can't say what it is. You can't pin it down. You can't say what shape it is. You can't say how big it is. You can't say what its limitations are. You can't say it's this but not that. And yet it is exactly itself. It is what it is. It's an actuality. So everything is actual, but everything is an actual infinity. In other words, it includes infinite properties. Another way to say it is, you can experience anything in infinite number of ways, and you never will have come to the complete set of ways in which you could experience it. How many ways can you experience a tree? I mean, from how many angles can you view it? From how many distances can you view it? You know, from how many degrees of motion can you view it? There's no limit. And yet, and experientially, it is all of that. Very specifically, very precisely. But it's a precision that is not a precision of definability. It's a precision of actuality, but it's an actual infinity. An actual infinity. And that is the category of condition we have here. It's a condition of actual infinities. Infinities is moot because the single and the plural of infinity is the same thing. So you can have as many infinities as you want and still have just infinity. Because, 10 times infinity equals infinity. You divide infinity by infinity, it equals infinity. So you can slice it and dice it, but you don't actually get more or less of anything.
See, so I think if anybody asks me a question, I give those answers if I'm going to be honest with them, truthful with them. On the other hand, on a sort of a day-to-day basis, I'm not going to drive down, the 880 here, and all the while I'm driving down the 880, back home, am I going to think that the road is basically a projection of my mind? I'm not quite there.
It's not, but it's not a projection of your mind. It can't be said what it is.
Okay. In my mind, that's about at the same degree. Is to see that the what I view and what I experience as I'm driving down the road is one of among a number of different possibilities of what's sort of going on. And because I don't know why I don't do that, but I guess I would probably be overwhelming.
But you're also with the actuality of what's going on, and you're processing that actuality, sorting it out. In other words, you're seeing exactly what you're seeing, even as you're thinking about what you're seeing and seeing and responding to what it seems to be, in correcting as you reprocess and so on and so forth, because it's constantly changing, constantly morphing, has ambiguities and details that you sort of do your best to stay on top of, even though you can't know exactly about every detail, unless you were going like a 1/16 of a mile an hour and looking around like this and taking still pictures and analyzing them and whatever, right? So it's a kind of it's a dynamic, go with the flow, give it your best shot kind of thing.
Yeah, as long as my sort of working mind, operational mind is is taking care of all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm done.
of course.
But but at the moment when I actually start bringing the thinking mind involved, then all that stuff, you know, I'm basically not aware of.
Yeah, but you don't drive with your thinking mind, do you? I
No.
mean, anyone who drives with their thinking mind is a bad driver.
That's exactly right.
A good driver is not thinking about it, they're doing it.
Yeah.
Like a good skier, is they're not thinking about it, they're doing it. A good dancer, they're not thinking about it, they're doing it. And this is the point: is that, and the doing is continuums. The doing is infinities. The doing is not made out of discrete chunks that you can say what any of it is. It's an ongoing flow of inscrutability, of indescribability. And it's just a matter of noticing that experience is that intrinsically, and that our functioning within experience is that intrinsically, even as the conscious mind simultaneously functions according to its modes. But that is a relatively small proportion of, let's say, the sum total of what's going on.
Right. I guess my initial question was that it seems to me, you know, for a person like you, you have that view sort of 24/7, sort of constantly on, whereas my view is very brief.
Right.
What do I do? I guess I just try to pay attention, just try to stay a little bit more aware.
Okay.
And so I'm able to see sort of the possibilities, the potential, the emptiness of things, that sort of translucency, you know, things aren't really exactly as concrete as and as serious as they seem to be.
Right.
But, you know, by God, you know, the world is a very powerful thing, you know, at least, you know, sort of the conventional world, you know, it grabs me, and before I know it, I'm in some drama again.
Right.
Which is sort of typical,
Sure.
it seems to me. So,
But from time to time, you can find yourself
yes.
just being with experience more
Yes.
nakedly.
Yes.
And that's all that matters. That's the powerful fact. Because just doing that occasionally when you find it easy, it is powerful. It trumps. It's cumulative. So every time that happens, the next time will happen more strongly and more frequently. And this builds up. And this is what the path of unfolding looks like. It looks like going to this, as long as it's easy, and then you fall away from it. And then sooner or later you go back to it. It might be in 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months or 5 years. But sooner or later you're going to come back to it. And then you'll fall off it. And sooner or later you come back to it and fall off it. But it trumps. Because it's real. And the falling off it is not. It's partial. And so in the long run, as this cycle continues, sooner or later you come back to it more and more often, more and more strongly, and for greater periods of time. And that's just the nature of the process. That is the path. Just that. It doesn't need anything extra. Doesn't even need any theory.
Mm-hmm.
Just that going to this, because it teaches itself. It shows it reveals itself. It's self-verifying. And anything that's said about it or anything like that, like in a format like this, is redundant. The direct experience is what's powerful.
Well, I think that's good news.
It is good news. Because that makes it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not necessarily efficient, but you can't make it more or less efficient than it's going to be for you anyway, for any individual, because your nature is that the process will be the way it will be, because that's who you are and with the resources you have to bring to bear and the milieu within you're working from and your starting point and all those other factors which are just happen to be what they are. So it all kind of does itself in that regard too.
The apparent difficulty seems to be in when you are involved in life and job and all that you feel like you need the space to notice. But eventually you get to where you realize that there's the only way I can put it is like a letting go, where you watch yourself interacting. You see that the persona or the character that's necessary for the moment, whether you're talking to a student or or the cashier or anybody. A character comes up to play the role, and you see how spontaneous it is, and it's
another way to
fluid.
put it is that noticing is not dependent upon conditions.
Right.
So you don't need to extricate yourself from the thick of your life to find yourself with naked experience. It can happen in any context. You can be in the thick of some heated exchange or something, and all of a sudden, just, whoa, sorry about that, doesn't it come back, whatever.
You can be apparently
So-
involved in the drama, and
Yeah.
you notice that it's a character.
Right.
It's being played.
And the more
It's just
the more skill you
fluid.
the more strength you develop through repeated noticing, the more easy it'll be for you to notice noticing in contexts that you would have expected to be very foreign to, or antagonistic to that. It's not like you need to be in a quiet space and sit down and meditate or something like that. Quite on the contrary, it just comes when it comes, and you learn to become very sensitive to this freshness and spontaneity. And it's wow, here it's coming.
Right.
back.
Yeah, the stellar thing about it is for me anyway, the thing that stands out is the fluidity of it.
Yeah.
It's fluid, it flows, and by flowing I don't mean that it's smooth and mellow and all that, but that it's just spontaneous.
And that'll be the last word. Good night, everybody.
I got the last word!